What began as a typical celebrity interview on Steven's late-night show spiraled into one of the most explosive, emotionally charged confrontations ever aired on late-night television. Last night's episode featuring tech mogul and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk was expected to be a standard, if slightly provocative, conversation about AI, space exploration, and Tesla's latest innovations. Instead, it turned into a headline-dominating spectacle that has already sent shockwaves through the internet, racking up millions of views in under 12 hours. From the start, there was tension, subtle at first, but unmistakable for those paying attention. Steven, known for his razor-sharp sarcasm and willingness to dig into his guests with uncomfortable questions masked as jokes, greeted Elon with his usual brand of smirking charm. But Elon, stoic, measured, wasn't laughing. "You've been quite the headline lately," Steven said, leaning back in his chair, cards fanned out in his hand like weapons. "Not because of Mars or AI this time, but something a little closer to home. Let's talk about your child. Now, your daughter." Elon, silent for a moment, adjusted slightly in his seat. The smile he had forced earlier flattened out completely. Steven continued without waiting for permission. "I think a lot of viewers are wondering, how can someone who claims to be building the future have such outdated views on gender identity? Your daughter, formerly Xavier, now goes by Jenna. And yet you've been criticized for refusing to acknowledge her transition, for holding what many are calling transphobic views rooted in, what? Tradition? Ego? Or just plain bigotry?" Gasps rippled from the audience. Some genuine, others staged for dramatic effect. Elon turned slightly, his brow furrowed, jaw clenched. "Is that really the road you want to go down?" Elon said, voice low, calm, but pointed. Steven smirked, as if he'd been waiting for that exact reply. "It's not me going down any road, Elon. This is your child we're talking about. You say you love your kids, but how can you love someone when you refuse to accept who they are? Isn't denying your daughter's identity the very definition of transphobia?" At this, Elon sat forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He didn't respond right away. The camera cut to a close-up. His eyes were focused, burning not with anger, but with something more complex. Sadness, maybe. Fatigue. "I'm not going to sit here and let you use my family to score cheap points," Elon said, voice steady, but heavy. "You're making a spectacle of something you don't even begin to understand." Steven chuckled, too quickly. "It's not cheap, Elon. It's called accountability. You've posted tweets mocking pronouns, promoting regressive ideals, while your daughter has completely severed ties with you. You're one of the most powerful men in the world, and yet you can't even do the bare minimum of respecting your child's wishes." The tension turned electric. The studio felt like it had dropped 10 degrees. Elon leaned back, folding his hands in his lap. "Is that what this is to you?" he asked, looking Steven dead in the eye. "Respect means blind. Submission now? Do you even know what she's going through? What we've gone through?" Steven crossed one leg over the other. "What she's going through is being strong enough to live her truth in spite of the people who refuse to see her." That's when something subtle shifted in Elon. He paused, visibly processing, choosing his next words carefully. "You're mistaking ideological extremism for strength," he said. "There's a difference between acceptance and indoctrination. And maybe if you'd seen what I've seen, what this so-called truth can do when weaponized, you wouldn't be so quick to judge." The crowd fell uncharacteristically silent. This wasn't a rehearsed spat. This was real. Steven tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "So now you're saying your daughter's transition is part of some conspiracy? That's dangerously close to the kind of rhetoric that gets people hurt." Elon didn't flinch. "I'm saying that we've created a culture where questioning anything is forbidden, where dissent is vilified, where children are given irreversible medical treatments before their brains are even fully developed, and any parent who raises a concern is labeled a monster. If that's progress, then maybe the future really is broken. Stephen looked momentarily taken aback, perhaps not expecting Musk to push back with such force. He recovered quickly. So your solution is to double down on your archaic worldview and call it reason? That's not free speech, that's just fear in a lab coat. Elon leaned in. Fear? You think I'm afraid of the future? I build the future. But I won't pretend that truth and biology don't exist just to make people comfortable. That's not science, that's religion. A few audible wows trickled from the audience. The mood had shifted from late-night banter to something much deeper, more raw. This was no longer just a disagreement. It was a clash of philosophies. The battle lines were drawn between two towering figures. One the self-proclaimed gatekeeper of progress, the other a man who helped shape the modern world, now increasingly isolated in it. But the real eruption hadn't even happened yet. And when it did, it would leave Stephen speechless. For a beat, the air in the studio hung thick, charged with the kind of energy that made audiences lean forward on their couches at home, holding their breath. Stephen, for the first time in what felt like his career, hesitated. The familiar cadence of his quick wit and smug comebacks faltered. But it was brief. He leaned forward, elbows pressing into the edge of his desk, fingers steepled in front of his mouth. You know what's really frightening. Elon? Stephen finally said, voice low but sharp. It's not kids figuring themselves out. It's billionaires using their platform to undermine their identities. You act like it's brave to stand up against woke culture, but really, it's just cowardice. You couldn't handle the fact that your child became someone you couldn't control. That's not ideology. That's ego. The moment those words left his mouth, a ripple moved through the audience. Even some of Stephen's most loyal fans in the crowd looked visibly stunned. The jab had landed, and it wasn't subtle. It was personal. Elon's jaw tensed. He inhaled deeply through his nose, eyes glassy for the first time since the interview began. But he didn't blink, didn't look away. My daughter didn't just figure herself out, Elon said, slowly, deliberately. She was fed an ideology, groomed online through echo chambers disguised as safe spaces, forums and communities that push affirmation over understanding, silencing anyone, even parents, who ask questions. Stephen sat back, arms crossing. You mean communities where young people finally feel seen? No, I mean communities where mental illness is romanticized, dissent is shamed, and irreversible decisions are encouraged like trends. Where if you so much as suggest therapy, you're labeled abusive. That is not safety. That's dogma. You sound like you're blaming the internet for your daughter's decision, Stephen snapped, tone hardening. At what point do you just accept that maybe, just maybe, she's happier being who she is now, and it's you who can't let go of who she used to be? There it was again. Another strike. And this one too cut deep. Elon's eyes dropped for a moment. He exhaled, a soft, shaken breath that felt more human than anything he'd said so far. When he looked back up, the vulnerability in his expression was impossible to ignore. I lost my son, he said, voice cracking just slightly, the words catching in his throat. You don't understand what that's like. Watching someone you raised, loved, protected, disappear. Not because they died, but because the person they were was buried under slogans and hashtags. A pin could have dropped. I didn't abandon my daughter, Elon continued. She abandoned me, because the culture she was absorbed into told her that any parent who doesn't affirm, who doesn't instantly agree, is evil. She changed. Her name. Severed contact. Cut me out of her life like a bad tweet. Stephen looked like he was going to say something, but Elon didn't give him the chance. You sit here, behind a desk, with applause signs and writers feeding you lines. And you point fingers at me, calling me a bigot, when you have no idea what it's like to feel your own child slip away from you, not into happiness, but into a performance, into an identity curated by algorithms, shaped by strangers, and enforced by mobs. You mean the mob of people who want others to feel safe in their own skin? Stephen asked, incredulous. Is that who you're vilifying now? I'm vilifying the system, Elon shot back. The system that tells children they can never be wrong about how they feel, that their emotions are infallible, even when they contradict observable reality, that parents must submit or be branded monsters. That system took my son from me and gave me a stranger who won't even speak my name. Elon's voice broke on. The last word, just slightly. He cleared his throat, shook his head, visibly trying to hold himself together. And then, for the first time, he said it. She used to build rockets with me. Silence. The words hung there like ghosts. The audience, the cameras, even Stephen himself, froze. She was brilliant. She'd ask questions about escape velocity. She understood orbital mechanics better than most adults. And then one day, she started disappearing. Not physically, just mentally, emotionally, piece by piece. And every time I tried to talk to her, it was like speaking through glass. Until finally she was gone, replaced with someone who hated me. His voice cracked again, and this time Elon didn't fight the emotion. A single tear slid down his cheek, and he made no effort to wipe it away. That's what the woke mind virus does. It doesn't free people. It erases them. The studio was dead quiet. Even the control booth reportedly delayed cutting to commercial. No cue cards, no fake applause, no sound effects. Just a room full of stunned silence as the world's most famous tech visionary sat on national television, crying, not for pity, not for show, but for something far deeper. Stephen, for once, looked small behind his desk. He reached for a water bottle, unscrewed the cap with a shaky hand, and took a slow sip. He tried to recover, clear his throat, square his shoulders, shift the energy. But it was too late. The tide had turned, and Elon wasn't done. You think I don't care about people? Elon asked, wiping his face with the sleeve of his jacket. I've dedicated my life to humanity. I've put everything on the line to give our species a chance at survival. I've taken bullets for progress, but I won't be bullied into pretending this ideology doesn't destroy families. He turned slightly to the audience now, eyes sweeping the room. Being inclusive doesn't mean silencing critical thought. It doesn't mean rewriting science. It doesn't mean turning kids into ideological soldiers. And it sure as hell doesn't mean punishing parents for loving their children enough to say, "Wait, let's talk about this." Stephen opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. That's when Elon leaned back again, calm now, but defiant. You wanted a headline. "Stephen," he said, eyes sharp again, "here it is. I won't apologize for loving my child enough to fight for her, even if she hates me for it." The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't boo. They just sat there, stunned. Stephen adjusted his collar. "Well," he said stiffly, "I think we've heard enough from you tonight." A murmur rippled across the audience. Elon raised an eyebrow. "Is that your version of journalism? Cut the mic when it gets inconvenient?" The host didn't respond. Instead, he looked off camera and gave a slight gesture to the producers. "Booth." "Elon, this interview is over," Stephen said, now clearly rattled. "We're done here." Elon stood slowly. "No, Stephen," he said, voice quiet but piercing. "You're done." And with that, the studio doors swung open behind him. But Elon didn't leave. He stood, hands at his sides, expression unreadable, and stared down at Stephen, who now sat frozen in a posture that no longer looked like control. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Some craned their necks toward the open doors, expecting a dramatic exit. Others stared wide-eyed at Elon, waiting to see what he would do next. The cameras were still rolling. No commercial cut. No pre-recorded segment waiting in the wings. Just a silent standoff between one of the world's most polarizing figures and a host who had just lost command of his own stage. Elon turned slowly back toward the desk. "You wanted me gone," he said, voice calm, chilling in its restraint. "But I haven't even said what I came here to say." Stephen's jaw clenched. "You've said more than enough." "No," Elon replied, eyes narrowing. "What I said was truth. What you heard was offense." Stephen tried to recover some of his edge. "This isn't a tech summit, Elon. It's a talk show. And I'm not going to let this platform become a TED Talk for fringe conspiracies and faux victimhood." Elon tilted his head slightly, like he was studying something under glass. "Do you hear yourself? You invited me here. You pressed my personal life. You accused me on national television of being a bigot and a failure as a father. And when I respond, suddenly it's too far?" Stephen bristled. "You've been peddling these ideas online for years. Don't act like you're some innocent man caught off guard." "No, I'm not innocent," Elon said sharply. "I'm a father who's watched his child be consumed by a machine, one that preaches tolerance, but only for those who obey. You think my tweets are the problem? You think words on a screen caused this? It's far bigger than that," Stephen scoffed. "You mean the so-called woke mind virus?" "Yes," Elon answered without hesitation. "And the fact that you have to put it in quotes like it's a joke is exactly the problem. It is a virus, ideological, cultural, and more contagious than anything we've ever seen. It hijacks empathy. It turns compassion into coercion. And no one is allowed to question it without being burned at the stake." The audience was still, silent. Some people had their phones out, filming, uncertain if they were watching a public meltdown or a moment of historic candor. Stephen leaned forward, forcing his voice to sound firm. "You're blaming an entire generation for your personal failings. You're painting progress as poison because you can't control the narrative anymore. That's not bravery, Elon. That's fragility." Elon blinked once. "You want to talk about fragility?" He gestured toward the audience, toward the viewers at home. "Fragility is needing safe spaces from words. Fragility is canceling people for misusing a pronoun. Fragility is calling a man transphobic for mourning the loss of the child he used to know." His voice rose, not with anger, but with passion, raw and cracking at the edges. "My daughter didn't leave because I was cruel. She left because she was told I was evil for not surrendering, for asking questions, for wanting to wait. Wait, Stephen. That's all I asked. Let's wait. Let's talk." But there was no space for that. "You make it sound like she was brainwashed," Stephen countered. "She made a choice. A courageous one. She claimed herself." "No," Elon replied, his voice suddenly low again. "She was claimed by something. You say she made a choice, but I watched her drown in ideology, in hashtags and slogans and influencers who told her that anyone who hesitates, even for love, is an enemy." He paused, swallowing hard. "Do you know what it feels like to be labeled the villain in your own child's story, simply for asking, 'Are you sure?'" Stephen opened his mouth, but nothing came. "That's not courage," Elon said, now fully addressing the room, his voice echoing across the soundstage. "That's coercion. And we've normalized it. We've built entire institutions around it. And we punish the people who resist it." He turned back to Stephen. "You have no idea what it's like to be me, to be painted as a monster for not giving up on someone you love, to see your child slip away into a script written by strangers, and when you try to reach in and pull them back out, the world calls you dangerous." Stephen stood now too, almost instinctively, like sitting had become a form of submission. "You don't get to monopolize grief, Elon. Everyone in this audience knows someone who struggled with identity, with acceptance. You're not the only one hurting. Then why, Elon said, his voice quieting again, is the only hurt that matters the one that conforms? Why is a father's grief dismissed? Because it doesn't fit your narrative? Stephen didn't reply. The silence stretched. Finally, Elon exhaled. The rage, the resistance, the grief. It had all coalesced into something sharp and crystalline in his words. And now, it was over. His chest rose and fell slowly. He looked tired, but resolute. I didn't come here to be liked, he said softly. I came here to speak, and now I have. Stephen gestured again off stage, more urgently this time. We're done. Get him out of here. A few stagehands stepped forward hesitantly, unsure how to proceed. Elon didn't resist. He turned slowly toward the open doors that had been waiting behind him this entire time. But as he walked, he looked over his shoulder one final time. History won't remember who clapped tonight, he said. It will remember who stayed silent. And with that, Elon Musk walked off Stephen's late-night show. The audience didn't clap. No music played. The band sat still. Even the applause sign remained dark. Stephen stood in place, jaw tight, hands gripping the edges of his desk, visibly shaken. He turned toward the camera. His eyes weren't just angry, they were uncertain. And the words he was supposed to say next? They never came. The screen faded to black, but within minutes of the broadcast's end, the internet was on fire. Clips of the confrontation flooded every corner of social media. From TikTok snippets to 12-minute Twitter breakdowns and full uploads. On YouTube labeled things like Elon destroys Stephen with brutal truth bombs and the late night imploded. The moment had become more than a late-night skirmish. It was cultural shrapnel, tearing through echo chambers on both sides of the ideological spectrum. Every headline screamed the same question. What just happened on Stephen's late-night show? On the surface, it was a showdown between two powerful men. One a billionaire industrialist, the other a cultural commentator backed by a studio audience and a carefully curated brand of progressive cool. But beneath the surface, it was something darker, rawer, and infinitely more human. A father's grief colliding head-on with a host's ideological armor, and neither walked away unscathed. Within hours, the official channel uploaded the full segment. Unedited. No commentary. Just a stark, uninterrupted 41 minutes of rising tension, pointed accusations, raw emotion, and that final, unforgettable moment when Elon Musk shed a tear, looked Stephen dead in the eye, and said, History won't remember who clapped tonight. It will remember who stayed silent. What followed wasn't just analysis. It was war. Blue-check accounts called it a disgrace. Platforming hate, some labeled it. LGBTQ+ advocacy groups issued statements, condemning Elon's words as dangerous and inflammatory. Prominent trans activists dissected every sentence, arguing that his grief didn't justify the harm his views could cause. Others accused Stephen of letting the segment go on too long, of not cutting him off sooner. But just as loud, perhaps louder, was the opposite reaction. Commentators who had long been silenced by mainstream media called the moment historic. Podcasts erupted with praise. Finally, they said, someone said what every terrified parent has been thinking. Parents across the globe flooded comment sections and Reddit threads, sharing their own stories of alienation, confusion, and heartbreak. Some even wrote open letters, thanking Elon for being the only public figure willing to say the quiet part out loud. And amidst it all, Stephen stayed silent. The show's Twitter account didn't post the usual follow-up quip or meme. No YouTube behind-the-scenes clip dropped. No podcast debrief. The studio remained quiet. There was no laughter to soften the edges this time. No witty monologue to spin the narrative. Just silence. By noon the next day, Stephen emerged. In a carefully framed video posted to his personal Instagram, without his trademark band, without the live audience, he sat at his desk in a dimly lit room. The framing was tighter, intimate, almost claustrophobic. He began simply, "I want to talk about what happened last night." His voice was measured, not the cocky persona viewers had come to expect, but quieter, reflective, humbled maybe, but not apologetic. What was meant to be a conversation about accountability turned into something bigger, and maybe more painful, than any of us expected. He paused, looked down at his hands, then back up. "Elon Musk said things I disagree with. Deeply. Things I know will hurt a lot of people in our community, and I don't take that lightly. But he also said things that were real and emotional, and whether I agree with his beliefs or not, I saw a man grieving." Another pause. "I still believe in affirming people's identities. I still believe that progress means being willing to evolve. But I also believe in something else, that conversations don't always go the way you want them to, especially when you're face to face with someone's pain." There was a long beat before he concluded. "If last night upset you, I hear you. If it moved you, I hear that too. We'll be back tomorrow. Maybe not with jokes, but with honesty. And I think, after last night, that's a good place to start." It was the closest Stephen had ever come to admitting he'd been unprepared. But the real finale of the story wasn't in what he said, or even what Elon had said. It was in what happened the night after. Elon Musk returned to Twitter with a single tweet. "I wasn't trying to win an argument, I was trying to save a memory." That tweet alone garnered over 3 million likes in 24 hours. And that night, he did something unexpected. He didn't go on another talk show. He didn't host a Spaces or call into a podcast. Instead, he shared an old video, grainy, handheld footage of a much younger Elon sitting at a small workbench with a child beside him. The child, Xavier, before the transition, was asking questions about how the Mars lander worked. Their voice was excited, curious, innocent. Elon's voice in the clip was soft, patient, proud. The caption was brief. "I remember this version of you. I loved you then. I love you now, even if I don't understand you." That was it. No policy debate. No ideological crusade. Just the most honest admission a parent could give. "I don't understand you, but I still love you." And somewhere in the chaos of trending hashtags and YouTube comment wars, that message cut through. For days, the confrontation remained a cultural earthquake, rattling through newscasts, op-eds, and every political pundit's reaction reel. But gradually, the noise softened. The battlefield cooled, and people started talking, not just about who won the argument, but about the deeper questions it raised. What does unconditional love really mean? When does affirmation become abandonment? And in an age obsessed with identity, how much room is left for connection? Stephen's late-night show returned the next evening. No musical guest, no comedy opener, just Stephen, back at his desk, hands folded, eyes steady. The monologue that night was different. No applause track, no smug punchlines. Just a man who had come face to face with something he couldn't reduce to satire. And somewhere, in a mansions, or a lab, or maybe on a balcony staring out at the stars, Elon Musk sat quietly. He didn't tweet. He didn't gloat. He didn't storm stages or issue retractions because the moment had already passed. And whether people agreed with him or not, whether they cheered or condemned or sat in stunned silence, one thing was undeniable. They were listening.